Ladies and gentlemen, the amazing John White is on the mic. All righty. So, I would love to introduce John White to you all. John, what will you be talking to us about today?
Today I'm talking about, well, the title of the talk is Taking the Pulse of Your Community Event with Power Platform in Azure. To cut to the chase of it, really, it's how to do Twitter monitoring with out-of-the-box tools. And I'm going to show you the journey we went on with tyGraph for Twitter, which is the analytics that we're using for this particular show here.
Great. So you can share your slides and then we're ready to start.
I should be sharing now. Is it coming across?
Yeah, that's your slide, so that's all good.
Perfect. And I guess if we're good to go, I'll jump right in. Let's see here. We have a few admin slides to get through first. To start with, if you haven't already heard, the SharePoint conference, the one that isn't happening this year but is happening next year, is also being renamed and becoming more inclusive. Now it's the Microsoft 365 conference. So mark your calendars for March 23rd to the 25th, 2021. Same place, Vegas at the MGM Grand. Also, this event would not be possible without the support of sponsors. Here's a list of them on the screen. I'm a representative of the one at the very bottom right there. We'll be talking just a little bit about that as we go. And to introduce myself, I am the CTO and co-founder of tyGraph. I'm an Office Apps and Services MVP as well as a data platform MVP. So I've been in the SharePoint space for a very long time, and also been heavily involved in business intelligence as well. Those are my particulars up there on the screen, and please feel free to reach out at any point in time if you have any questions around this. Also, as we go through the presentation, you're going to see a QR code and a URL at the bottom of most of the slides. They will take you to a form. If you want to fill that form out, this deck will be sent directly to you pretty much immediately. There's a question on there about, do you want to know more about tyGraph? We do analytics for Office 365. If you're interested in that sort of thing, you might want to hit yes. What will happen is then you will be sent some more information on tyGraph, but that's the only thing we're going to do if you select that question. All right. Oh, finally, sorry, we've got a couple of more of these slides to get through. We're giving away 3 Oculus Quest all-in-ones. So all you have to do is visit the vendors booth sessions and watch the videos and submit answers to enter the raffle. You'll need at least 5 correct answers to win. And then finally, the conference is donating a number of, or making some donations to a number of charities. In fact, 10% of all of the sponsor proceeds are going to community relief as well. So please, if you're so inclined, help us out and sponsor one of these fine charities. Finally, there's a lot of slides on this this part. If you're interested in business intelligence and business intelligence news, myself and my colleague Jason Himmelstein, that's me on the right, by the way, in the picture, host a podcast called Bifocal. We do this weekly, although I can't tell you exactly which day it comes out every week. But we cover the news and interviews in the Power BI space in particular. Okay. With that, we'll get to the agenda. So, talking about measuring your community event or the buzz around your community event, we're going to start out by talking about what it is we're trying to do, the challenge, and we're going to wind up settling on Twitter. And then we're going to walk through how this is all done. We're going to look at how you capture tweets, how you store tweets, some of the options around reporting and sharing tweets. Then we'll jump into some real-time options or some near real-time options. Basically, we'll be talking about data latency. I'll also talk about where we've come using tyGraph for Twitter. This isn't a sales pitch. This isn't a product that is for sale. We offer this up to the community, but it's evolved over a number of years, starting actually with the Future of SharePoint event that Jeff talked about in his keynote. It happened, it was 4 or 5 years ago now in San Francisco. That was really the genesis of this. So I'll talk a little bit about that, and then we'll wrap up. On this slide, by the way, you see the link and that QR code I was talking about. So again, as a reminder, if you want the slides, just either the QR code just takes you to that link. That'll take you to a Microsoft Forms form. Fill that out, and you should be emailed pretty much immediately a copy of this deck. All right. So let's get into the challenge. What is it we're trying to do? Well, as the title of the talk says, we're monitoring the pulse of the event. So we really want to go out and find out what people are talking about around an event like this one, or say a SharePoint Saturday or something like that. We're going to want to get, we're basically going to want to go to the social media to find out what people are talking about. It's ubiquitous. Just about everybody has at least one, if not multiple social media accounts. The question is, which is the right one to use, or which are the right ones to use? One of the problems we'll run into pretty quickly are privacy concerns if we're trying to collect this up and report on it en masse. And in fact, tools like Facebook and LinkedIn are very difficult to get to. At least they're difficult to get to other people's communications, because you want to be measuring what everyone is saying. And it's practically impossible today using the Facebook API, at the very least, to go and get that information. Conversely, Twitter has an open policy. When you're posting on Twitter, everyone can see it, and that's part of your conditions of use. So it's in the public domain. So it's public data. So it's a pretty good platform to choose from that standpoint, from a technical standpoint. And in addition, it's pretty widely used, especially around events, in terms of getting the word out and then people communicating around event using typically a hashtag to, every event has a hashtag. This to be able to track it. This event has the hashtag M365VM. And we're actually tracking it for this. We'll see that here in just a little bit. So we're going to wind up basically wanting to measure Twitter. All right. So now that we've settled on Twitter as a platform, what are some of the challenges we have in getting data out of Twitter? To start with, Twitter itself is not a database. It is a service. And there is no direct way to go in and query this with a tool and just get an OData feed, for example. I can't connect to Twitter, say, with Power BI and just get a feed of a particular search. So the question is, how do we go about gathering this information? Yeah, as the slide says, there's no freely available data stream. Twitter itself has a number of APIs. It has a search API, and it also has a streaming API. So you can at any given point in time use the API to go back and search for tweets for a period of time. That period of time is going to depend on the license you purchase from Twitter, and there is a free option. Or you can stream. You can basically log onto the tweet and have the tweets sent to you. But I think more importantly, and certainly for a wider audience, there are a lot of automation tools that are available to you that support Twitter, and we'll get into that here in just a moment. So what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to collect these tweets up so that we can report on them later. So the first thing we obviously have to do is acquire the tweets. We have to go and get them. And once we have them, we have to put them somewhere. So we're going to have to settle on a technology to do that. We're then going to need to transform them into a format that's going to suit our needs for reporting, ETL in the world of business intelligence. And once we have them in the shape we need them to be in, we're going to want to report on them, build a report against this information. And then finally, because we're dealing with these public events, these typically SharePoint or Office 365 type events, we're going to want to share these out with the wider community. So we're going to any of our solution is going to have to encompass all of these criteria. All right, so let's start attacking these one at a time. Let's have a look at how we're going to capture tweets. And I mentioned that there's a number of automation tools that are available to help us capture tweets. So to start with, there's tools like IFTTT or Zapier. I don't know if any of you folks, you're probably familiar at least with IFTTT, if not Zapier. In the Microsoft space, Power Automate or flows within Power Automate would fall into these same categories. But IFTTT and Zapier both have connectors for Twitter. In the Microsoft world, however, Power Automate does as well. In fact, the Twitter connector was one of the first connectors available to Microsoft Flow. In addition, in Azure, we have logic apps. And if you weren't already aware, a logic app in Azure is really exactly the same thing as a flow. It's not 100% the same thing, but it has all of the same underlying architecture and the same UI, in fact. So building a logic app in Azure looks and feels exactly the same as building a flow in Power Automate. The difference is how they're packaged and, frankly, how they're built. Is another. We'll get into that here in a second. Other options for capturing tweets, of course, are to build a custom application, and you can build your own tools that go out and use the Twitter APIs. You've got the search API, as I mentioned before, the streaming API, and both of those have enterprise options. Without the enterprise options, you're somewhat limited in what you can do. But I would argue that for any given event, though, you're not going to bump into those limitations. The enterprise requirements limitations are really quite high. Let's have a look at IFTTT, or if this then that, which is what IFTTT stands for, and Zapier. Using these tools, these are probably the simplest tools of the bunch to work with. I'm going to use IFTTT as an example here. Zapier is similar, but it has, of course, differences. With IFTTT, you basically create a trigger condition, and when that trigger condition is satisfied, you have an event. You take one particular action, and it's really that simple. It's like a flow with two actions, or just a trigger action and a simple action. With this approach, you'd get one search term per recipe. So if I wanted to monitor 3 events, or I wanted to monitor one event that had 3 hashtags, I would need to build 3 of these. They call them recipes in IFTTT. It's very, very simple to use. There's not much you can. There's not much to go wrong, really. Once you connect into your accounts, you can go to town. You can see actually on the right-hand side, that's a graphic of an IFTTT recipe, and you can see that whenever there's a new tweet, what we're doing here is we're adding a row to a CSV file in OneDrive. Now, when you're using these third-party tools, you're going to require an additional account for IFTTT or an account for Zapier. You can't just reuse your Office 365 account. Also, this information, and these at least temporarily, is going to be stored outside your tenant, and that may raise some security concerns if you're doing this within a business. And as I mentioned, they're quite simple: trigger and action, trigger and action. So our automation options are somewhat limited. We can't build in, looping, etc. with these tools. So take it what it is. These things are very easy to work with, but they are somewhat limited. They're also outside of the Microsoft space, and this is obviously a Microsoft conference we're talking to, so we're probably a little more comfortable within that space. And the same sort of, the equivalent sort of tools in the Microsoft space is, of course, Power Automate or Logic Apps. Same thing applies, however, from a search term standpoint. So each trigger can only be satisfied by a single option. So again, if you've got 3 terms for one event, you're going to need to build 3 flows in this particular case. It does run within your tenant, however, so that shouldn't raise any concern. It's also relatively simple, but it's more complex. One other thing you should note when you're using Power Automate to capture tweets is you're only going to get the first 140 characters of a tweet. Even though we can now do more than that, we are 280. Flow is unable to go, or Power Automate is unable to go and get that. And there is a licensing charge for this. So for the Twitter connector itself, it's free of charge, but you do pay per flow in the case of Power Automate. And in the case of Logic Apps, you're paying per action within a Logic App. So have a look at the licensing, see if it's going to meet your criteria. But you should be fine, again, for most events. And the last option would be build a custom application. As I mentioned before, there's both a search API and a stream API for Twitter. And if your scale gets really, really large, there are enterprise options available, but you can do an awful lot for free. This is obviously going to be the hardest approach of all of the approaches that I've talked about. It's relatively difficult. It's going to require some coding, but the converse of that, of course, is that it's highly, highly flexible. You can do whatever you want with it. And with a little bit of coding, you can get all of those 280 characters for the tweets if you want to do that. And once it's built, however, and this often gets lost, is that there's going to be a cost of ownership. You're going to have to run it. So there's going to be some form of DevOps required as we go. All right. covers off the capturing of the tweets. I should pause and ask, oh, I'm not sure if Martin's there at the moment, but I was going to ask if there's any questions. I did want to fire out, if you do have questions along the way, I'm just going to bring up my Teams, just see if you happen to have any there right now. And I do not have any questions right now. Okay, but please fire them away as we go. I like to answer questions as we go along. All right, so let's talk now a little bit about storing tweets. What are we going to do with our with the tweets once we have them? What are the requirements for a system that's going to store these tweets? Well, first off, you're going to have to be able to write to the storage mechanism from the capturing system. So let's say, for example, we chose IFTTT. There's going to have to be a connector for it. So Power Automate, of course, is fairly straightforward. There are connectors to just about everything. But one consideration might be that with Power Automate, the SQL connector is a premium connector. And if we don't have a premium license for Power Automate, maybe we'd want to use something different, like an Excel file or a SharePoint list or something like that. We also have to be able to read this system from the reporting system, or at least be able to get the data out of it in order to transform it. So, I see Martin with the little guy there. Good to see. The system is going to need to be relatively performant, although how performant it needs to be is going to be a function of your volume. So if you're running a SharePoint Saturday, you can probably expect to see, at most 1,000 tweets, usually as few as 200. So you don't need a lot of performance for that. But if you're going to be doing this over time or for a number of events, you're going to want to think about that. You do want to be able to make sure it scales to the event you're running or the events that you're running or monitoring. And if you can, you're going to want to choose a storage mechanism that has some sort of compute attached with it. What do I mean by that? I can store data in a file on a file system, or I can store data in a table in SQL Server. A table in SQL Server has compute attached to it. There's a language I can call. I can query it and get results back. All I can do with a file is read that file, and then I have to do all of the manipulation myself. So that's what I mean by compute attached storage. So you want to use that if you can. But here you have a very, very rich variety of options in terms of storage. And again, they run the gamut from cheap or free to expensive, from simple to complex. Everyone's familiar with CSV or Excel. We could store the tweets right there. There's connectors from all of these tools that just go and will add rows. In fact, that was the screenshot you saw before from IFTTT, was adding a line to a CSV file. SharePoint list is a perfectly acceptable way to store small amounts of data, although that small amount is rapidly becoming larger all of the time. It's kind of been known that you shouldn't really use a SharePoint list to store data long term, but I think that's starting to change a little bit. And again, for the volumes you might be looking at for a couple of events, a SharePoint list may be completely adequate. In fact, that's going to be the demonstration we have here in a few minutes. SQL database is pretty common, however, and that's a compute attached storage mechanism. For the record, a SharePoint list is not. So SQL database is going to be common, easily accessible, and well understood. But we can also stuff things in Azure Blob Storage. The Common Data Service, if you're a Power Apps user or a Power Automate user. The Azure Data Warehouse is really the Azure version of a SQL warehouse, and it can scale as big as you want it to. But boy, you're going to have to get the dollars out if you want it to scale really, really large. And then there's a new kid on the block that hopefully we'll get to talk about in a bit, called Azure Data Explorer. I'm just going to mention real quickly, Azure Data Explorer is not a tool, it's a database. It's just rather poorly named. It's also known as Kusto. So if you ever heard the name Kusto, that's what we're talking about here. But the new name or the production name of Kusto is Azure Data Explorer, which is a database, not a tool. In addition to storing permanently, you may want to consider also using middleware tools, possibly as a transformation engine to be able to get the data to a shape you want it to be, so you don't have to rely on your reporting tools to do it. So a couple of tools in this space are Azure Event Hub. And I could capture from Power Automate, and instead of dumping things into a SharePoint list or dumping things into a SQL database, I can put them on an event hub, and then multiple things can come and get them. You can subscribe to an event hub, things like Azure Streaming Analytics, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. All right. Now we want to talk about reporting and sharing. So what do we need when we want to run or what are we going to do when we want to? What are the requirements for reporting on this data? Well, obviously we have to be able to connect to the storage mechanism that we've chosen. So we got to choose a tool that's going to be able to do that. We want it to be flexible because we want to be able to change our mind on the go. We want it. We want to be able to make the data do things that maybe we didn't think it could do before. But at the same time, we want it to be as easy to use as possible. We don't want to have to be a data scientist to go and get that data. And the tool itself, much like the database, should be able to scale to the event that we're trying to measure. And then once we've got that report built, remember one of those primary requirements was to be able to share this data with the world. Well, then the reporting tool must be able to share anonymously. So what options, certainly in the Microsoft space, would we jump to consider? Well, Power BI seems the obvious option, and frankly, it is the obvious option. But we have other tools. We could very easily use Excel. The only problem with Excel is we can't share anonymously with the world. We could share internally with the company if that was our goal. Other tools like that, SQL Server reporting services, are same sort of criteria. Very, very good at building highly structured reports, but you can't share it anonymously. We could also look at third-party tools that connect to our data source. That's always an option that's open to us, and they may or may not suit our needs. So depending on your requirements, your mileage may vary. But the nice thing about Power BI is it does have an anonymous publication feature. It's called Publish to Web. And normally when I talk about Power BI, I exercise great caution. In fact, I have a session here tomorrow evening, my time, 6 p.m. Eastern time. It's all about using Publish to Web in Power BI and the things you want to look out for. And I can't stress this enough, it's not for sharing reports internally. It's only for use with sharing externally to your company. In fact, the license for Power BI prohibits you from using Publish to Web to share internally. So accepting the fact that it's a license requirement, it's a really bad idea generally to share reports externally or anonymously. Why? Because anybody can get access to that report. Even though the URL seems funny, it's rather discoverable. So you should only ever use this feature with public data, which, as I described earlier, Twitter data is. So it's perfectly acceptable when you're publishing Twitter or to be able to publish reports that are based on Twitter data. It's perfect for our use. Now, another thing to note about Publish to Web is it doesn't matter when you refresh your report in Power BI, the reports themselves are cached for 1 hour. So if I run a refresh on my report in Power BI, remember in Power BI the data is cached. So it goes out to the source data system, pulls things into a data cache, and the reports are run off of that. And that is refreshed on a schedule, but that schedule is independent from the anonymous schedule. So if you are on an hourly update schedule internally, your data, by the time the public sees it, could be up to 2 hours out of date. 1 hour for the initial refresh and an hour for the cache to expire publicly. So just be aware of that. Also, when you're using Publish to Web, those URLs are nasty. They are long and involved, so you're probably going to want to use a URL shortener, and there's a bunch of them available. I use Rebrandly because I can use my own company's URLs or branding on it, but you can use Bitly, et cetera, to shorten the URL. So with that, we've been through the basics. Let's have a look at putting together a very, very simple Twitter reporting system from scratch. So I'm going to start by bringing up a browser. Just bring this over to the screen here. And I'm going to come over here. And what I have here is a SharePoint list. So I've put together a SharePoint list to capture our tweets. because of course we're all familiar with SharePoint. We can run back and build this right now. And I've got a number of columns that have been added to SharePoint. To start with, I've taken the title field and renamed it to Twitter ID. I've also got a date time field called tweet date, and that's going to be in UTC time. We've got a author screen name and an author name with Twitter. You know, my Twitter handle is DiverDown1964, but my name is John White, so that's going to be the difference between the two here. We also have a URL to the author's profile picture. We have the search term that we're capturing, so this is the term that's being monitored. And we have the body of the tweet text. Okay, and I'm just going to do a refresh on this page just so we can see that. Hopefully we can see that it's running. Actually, these times are in they get converted. These are in Eastern time. So you can see there's been Tony Poll is the most recent tweet here on the M365 VM hashtag, talking about Martina giving a presentation. All right, so. How do we get the tweets in here? Well, I'm going to go over here into Power Automate, and I'm going to create a flow. And I'm going to create an automated flow. And I'm just going to call it M365 VM sample cap. What's my trigger going to be? Well, it's going to be based on Twitter. And you can see here are all the Twitter triggers. So when a new tweet is posted is my trigger. I'm going to go ahead and hit create. And it's as simple as that. It's asking me for my search text. So in this case, it's going to be, I'm looking for hashtag M365VM. Very simple. The next step is going to be, I want to put this in a SharePoint list. It's really this simple. So I'm going to pick SharePoint and I'm going to create an item. There we go. There's the action for create an item. So the first thing it wants to know is my site address. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to grab my site address. Come back over here to flow and punch it in. There we go. And then it's going to ask for all of the list name or prompt me for all the list names. This one is called tweets, as you might expect. And then we can start to fill out the fields, and all of the data that Twitter reports back on is here. So if I wanted to go to enter in, say, the tweet ID, I'm going to make that to be, I'm going to add that as the title. That's, remember, I renamed it in the view, but it's still got the internal name of title. The tweet date is, I believe it's created at, there we go. And I can just go and fill all of these fields out. And then down here in the search term, I'm just going to manually enter hashtag M365VM. All right. Now I'm not going to go off and save this guy because I've already got one built. And I'll just show you that if I can find it. I do not have it, and I don't know why. Was it in a? Oh, it's in a different environment, I betcha. Oh, I don't know why. It's, oh, there it is, Capture Virtual Marathon. I just didn't call it the same thing. Here we go, and let's come into Edit. And you can see this is the basically finished product, right? It's just pulled in the relevant fields from the Twitter action. And you can see it's run a bunch of times, or you will be able to see when it loads. There we go. The last time it loaded was 7 minutes ago. And by the way, this should run on about a 5-minute interval. So now I've got this flow populating this SharePoint list. The next thing I need to do is build a report from that. So I'm just going to open up Power BI. And I'm going to create a new Power BI desktop report. I am launching Power BI desktop on another window. We'll drag it over here as soon as it finishes loading. All right, and up we come. So let's get the screen over here. All right, there we go. All right, so we have a blank Power BI canvas. The first thing we're going to do is go and get data. And I'm going to type in SharePoint. I'm looking for connectors. There's 100 and some odd connectors in Power BI, so search is your friend. And I'm going against a SharePoint online list. I'm going to go ahead and connect to that. And it's asking me the site URL. So I happen to have that in the cache because I used that in my flow before. I'm just going to click OK here. And then I get to select the list in question. So if you remember, that list was called tweets. I'm going to come down here to tweets. And by the way, if you haven't seen this before, you have access to all of the lists of a SharePoint site, all the hidden lists, anything you might be after in the site, it's here, style library, etc., etc. But what I want to do now is transform data. When you're importing data from SharePoint, you'll bring in way too much if you just accept the defaults. So I'm going to click on transform data. It opens a window in my other screen. So I'm going to bring it over here. And this is Power Query. So this is our transformation step. This is getting the data in the shape we need it to. Basically, Power BI in this world combines the reporting and the transformation steps. So you can see we've got a bunch of data like file system object type and server redirect embed URI. I mean, the programmers among us will recognize that stuff, but we don't need it for our purposes. So I'm going to select my ID column. I'm going to select my title column. That's the tweet ID, not the SharePoint ID. I'm going to pick the date, the author screen name, the author name, the author profile URL. Just going to come over here a little bit further. The search term, and the tweet text. And that's all I need from the SharePoint list. But as you can see, if I scroll right, there's a lot of information that I don't need. And a lot of it's complex information, full records, and even full tables that I've connected. So I don't want any of that stuff. I'm going to right click now on one of these column headers, and I'm just going to say remove all of the other columns. So I get a nice, neat set of columns right here. Now, the other thing I need to do is fairly quickly set the data types. It doesn't know what the types are for SharePoint. So this is going to be an integer. This is going to be a whole number is what Power BI calls it. This is going to be a date and a time, of course. And here we've got, these are all going to be text fields. So I'm going to select them all. And I'm going to right click and set transform. Set my type. Come on, John. Change type. There we go. Set them to text. All right. So now we more or less have the data that we want now, and we now need to model it. So I'm going to go ahead, close and apply. And that's going to load our tweet information into Power BI. I don't know if you saw there, but there was 186 rows loaded. So ever since this particular monitoring tool has been running, there's been 186 tweets. So one of the first things I might want to know is how many tweets do we have so far on this hashtag? Well, I'm going to create a calculated measure to do that. Sounds harder than it is. I right click on the table. I'm going to create new measure. You can see up here in the formula bar, we've got measure equals. If you're familiar at all with Excel programming language, this is not going to be difficult. In fact, I want to get a count of the number of rows. That's going to tell me how many tweets we have. Oddly enough, there's a function called count rows. So I'm just going to select that. And I pass the name of the table into count rows, which is tweets. There it is. Now it's called measure. I'm going to change the name of the measure to tweets. And I'm just going to hit this check mark. Now our report canvas is still blank, but what I'm going to do now is select the report canvas, and I'm just going to click on this tweets. You can see the little calculator beside it. It means it's a calculated measure. I'm going to select that. It gives me a graph. I don't want a graph. I want a card. And you can see, in fact, we have 186 tweets that are stored right now in that SharePoint list. All right, now let's have a look at how that stuff broke down by time. I'm going to pick tweets again, and this time I am good with that column. But now I want to see how that broke down by day. So all I need to do here, I've got tweet date, and you can see there's a little calendar beside tweet date. That simply means that Power BI recognized that as a date field. So if I'm gonna drag that over to the axis, and when you have a date, it automatically will build a date hierarchy for you. I don't like having quarter there. In fact, we don't even need year, so I'm going to lose both of those. And actually, we don't even need month in this. I'll leave it there because I'll illustrate something here in just a second. But I'm going to just spread that out a little bit. And I'm going to drill down on my data. I'm not only going to drill down into this data point, but I'm going to drill down and across. If I had multiple months, it would open up all of the months to the same level. But I'm going to open that up, and you can see I turned on that flow 2 days ago. So we've had a number of tweets in the last couple of days. How many tweets? Let's just go back into this visual and turn on data labels. And you'll see we've had 91 today, 88 yesterday, 7, et cetera, et cetera. And the details of those tweets, no problem. In fact, I'm going to come up here to author profile URL, and I'm going to go up to column tools, and I'm going to tell it that in fact isn't just a text field, but it's actually an image URL. Why do I want to do that? Because I want to come down here and I want to put a picture of the person who did the tweeting. So I'm just going to click on author profile here, and you can see it will automatically render their picture. I'm also going to add in the tweet date, and it's automatically building that hierarchy for me. I don't want that in this case, so I'm going to hit the drop down here and just say, actually show me the tweet date, then show me maybe the author name, and just give me the text of that tweet. And by the way, I want this sorted by the tweet date, by most recent. And you can see this data is in fact in UTC time. It's not in the from the SharePoint list. It internally reported it in UTC time, even though SharePoint knew enough to convert it to. So you would have to do your own conversion. Not hard to do. I have a blog post on it, but we're not going to go into it right now. All right, so now I'm going to call this very, very simple report ready to publish. I'm going to hit the publish button, and I just want to make sure I know where it's going to go. Okay, it's going to go there. I'm going to go ahead and save my changes. I'm going to call it M365 VM demo. It's just saving it on my file system, but the important thing is that I publish it out to Power BI. Come down to tygraph for Twitter. I have to remember to delete this later. I'm going to go ahead and publish it. Then now that it's finished publishing, here's my Power BI service. I'm going to open up tygraph for Twitter. I'm going to go into content, and I should see M365 VM demo. That's the report we just published. In fact, if I select it, you should see there it is. So we can interact on it. We can just click that one, and it'll filter everything, etc. So everything's as we wanted it to be in our original report. We can also come down here now, over here to data sets and data flows, M365 VM demo, and I could schedule the refresh. So if I come down here to the scheduled refresh, I could turn that on and basically have the service go out and refresh my data so it's kept up to date on a regular basis. I'm not going to go through that process, but I can basically specify what times, how many times a day, etc. Let's come back here also and go back to the report. 365 VM demo. Now I'm ready to publish it out to the world. All I have to do is come up here. I click embed, publish to web. It gives me a warning. This data will be available. Of course it is. I could go ahead and create the embed code, publish, and I get this URL that I could then take, hand out to the world, or embed on a web page. But if I hand it out to the world, I can just paste it in here, and you're getting the anonymous view of that very same report. So in just a few steps, you're able to capture the tweets, store them, and report on them. All right. I think that covers that off. All right, let's come back to PowerPoint now. I'm going to go ahead and move to the next step. So let's talk a little bit now about real-time options. So I talked about refreshing the data before. Well, ideally what we want to do is keep the data as up-to-date as possible. When we're talking about a real-time data set in Power BI, excuse me, we have two options. There's a specific type of data set in Power BI called a push data set. And to use a push data set, we need to essentially write to the Power BI API. We can't just use Power BI Desktop to build a push style data set. But we can also hook onto it with tools like streaming analytics. When I use a push data set, however, I've got no way to transform my data. It's going to be the way I send it in there. I don't have a tool like Power Query. And I don't have much of a modeling capability either. I can't go in and create too many calculated measures. I can create some because I can build a report off of a live data set, which is what a push data set is. But it's extremely limited and really only has applicability in certain cases. However, this is the only way that I can set up a kiosk scenario, a real kiosk style scenario in Power BI and have the dashboard get updated as the numbers change. So you send in a tweet, it will update on the dashboard without anybody having to hit F5 or refresh or anything of that nature. That's pushing the data directly, and you have to use what's called a Power BI dashboard. It's a specific thing in Power BI, not a report, to use a push data set, or to use a push data set in that way. We have recently gotten in Power BI pull capabilities, and well, we've had one for a while. It's called direct query, but we also now have the ability to automatically have a page refreshed at a predetermined interval. So on a periodic basis, the page will refresh itself, so you don't have to hit the F5 key. One of the things it requires is a Power BI direct query. And so a Power BI direct query requires compute on that back end. So using a SharePoint list isn't going to cut it for that. You have to use a refresh model with something like a SharePoint list, but you could use it with SQL. One of the, it is taxing on the back end system, so you got to make sure you're going to have enough performance. But one of the killer for our scenario, for the most part, is that does not work anonymously. So we actually have some real time with tyGraph for Twitter, but we only use it internally to monitor the operation. We can't publish anonymous reports that have a push data set or even a direct query data set. All right. Now, as I mentioned before, you've kind of got the theory. I want to walk you through, how tyGraph for Twitter has evolved over the years and what its architecture was to where it is today. And it's going to show you some of the improvements in Power BI along the way, I think, as well. So to start with, for the Future of SharePoint event that I referenced earlier, on that, it was on May 4th. On that weekend prior, Jason, my colleague, and I mocked up this Twitter capturing tool with what was in preview at the time, Flow. And we used Flow to capture tweets, and we stuffed them into a SharePoint list. And we used Power BI to report on that data. Fairly straightforward. You can, I think, easily understand the architecture that's there on the screen. And then we could publish that anonymously, and people could come in and have a look at it. Well, that was a hit. We didn't stick with the SharePoint list very long though, because that got a lot of tweets, that event. Actually, we knew ahead of time that we were going to get an awful lot of tweets. It got about 12,000 in the one day, and that's a little more than the SharePoint list, at least at that time, wanted to handle cleanly and quickly. So we quickly replaced that with SQL Azure. SQL Azure connectors for, of course, Power Automate, and also, of course, for Power BI, and it's got the compute that you need if you want to do any direct query work. So tyGraph for Twitter ran this way for quite a long time. Scale started to become an issue, particularly around cost, and there was some flexibility things with SQL Azure. You're essentially paying for a transactional system that doesn't necessarily need to be transactional, because all we're really doing is collecting tweets and retrieving them from time to time. We never modify them. So we started looking at some big data technologies, partly as a cost-saving mechanism, and had a pretty good hard look at Databricks for a little while. And Databricks, if you're not familiar with it, is essentially Hadoop and a bunch of other technology, Python, all bundled up in a fairly usable package. And instead of dumping the tweets into SQL or into SharePoint, we just put them on a file in a JSON format and had Databricks read them from time to time. And you can connect to Databricks. It's got compute attached to it from Power BI. The problem was for us, it was a little too slow. It didn't run fast enough. It was a little expensive to keep that always connected database that Power BI would need to be able to refresh itself for a long, on all the time anyway. We then looked at using Power BI data flows in specifics, specifically external data flows, and had Databricks push data out to that format and had Power BI read that in. That was an interesting science experiment, but performance again wound up being a bit of an issue. A Power BI data flow, by the way, it uses the common data service, or a variant of the common data service to be more accurate. But this experiment kind of went away, and we went back to the SQL way of doing things for quite some time until I think it was mid last year. When we took a different approach. Instead of using Power Automate to collect the tweets, we built a custom app that connected directly to the API. We wanted all those 280 characters and some more flexibility. We didn't want to have to create a new flow for every monitored term. And that's how we got around that. And at this point, we have that application streaming into an Azure Event Hub. And that Event Hub is subscribed to by Streaming Analytics. And Streaming Analytics can connect to a Power BI push data set. It can also connect to SQL. And so that's what we had it do. And at the same time, instead of having a single data model for each report, basically storing that report's data in this data model and here and this, and having different refresh schedules for all of them, we centralized into one great big Power BI data set and use connected reports. So that's something else Power BI can do. I can have a single data set and have multiple reports connect to it. So each event gets its own version of the report that's filtered to that event, but it's actually all coming off the same cache data set with the same update schedule, etc. And this push data set over here at the upper right allows us to use a dashboard to monitor what's going on. That got changed slightly very recently. With Azure, we're using Azure Data Storage Explorer instead of SQL. Again, it's a bit of a better mechanism for write once, read many times style data and never update data. Azure Data Explorer, if you're unaware, is the engine that's behind App Insights in Azure, and it's extremely fast. But in all other ways, it was the same as the previous iteration, and this is how Tygraph for Twitter runs today. What does that look like? Like the next screen. But this is all to say, yes, you can go out and monitor this stuff. Yes, you can build it yourself. But if you like what we're doing here, all you have to do is ask. If you're having a community event, we're happy to provide analytics for it, as we are to this event today. So just ask. Send me a tweet at @diverdown1964 or an email jpw@limitedviz.com, and we can set this thing up for you. I'm just going to show you. I've got a couple of minutes. Wasn't quite sure. I only have a couple of minutes, but I'm going to just very quickly show you that dashboard that I was talking about. So let me see here. If I come in, is it the right? No, it's not. Sorry. I need to come up here. There we go. So in Azure, no, I've got the same. What am I doing here? Oh, I'm in the wrong screen. Sorry, folks. So if we look here, this is actually my event hub. Running in Azure for Tygraph for Twitter. You can see what the activity has been. There's the keynote of the event today. You can see it's had an impact today. Build had quite an impact. This is streaming analytics. That's if it loads. This is streaming analytics, the interface to streaming analytics in Azure. It has an input from that event hub, and you can see that the traffic gets generated. It's running these queries whenever something comes in, and it's pushing that this data out, you'll be able to see into Power BI tweets. And that's that live data set that I was talking about. So that I can come over here, I've got this TGT operations. I normally don't have to wait very long for this guy. There it is. I promise I'm not hitting F5 on the screen, or etc. But as tweets come in, you see these numbers are changing on the screen in real time. And the time that's coming in here is UTC time. So that's another way you'll know that that's happening. All right. Finally, back to the slides one more time. To wrap up, the thing you need to know is all of the tools are available for you to be able to go and do this stuff without you having to write any code, although you can write code if you want to. The important thing to note is you should choose the right tool for your requirements. If you've got a simple need to capture this stuff, use simple tools. Just use IFTTT, use Flow, and use use a SharePoint list, use an Excel file or a CSV file. If it's that simple, you can do that. But you also want to keep an eye on the future. If you've got ambitions on this, or you want it to grow, you might want to pick something with some more scalability options. But the simpler, the better, and that goes for your report design as well as your architecture. So with that, I believe I'm right on time. I'm going to say thank you for joining us, and it would be a good time to review any questions that we might happen to have, but I don't think we have any.
I'm checking that for you, John.
Excellent.
See, and maybe viewers are not aware of the fact that they can ask questions. So if you do, we might still have 1 or 2 minutes to answer those.
Sure, I can certainly stick. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was a great session, John. Really liked it. Yeah.
Thank you. I hope that was useful. Hi, C. Martin. How are you?
Yeah, so you are seeing me, but of course the audience isn't. We can sadly only stream one camera at a time with these live events. That will change very soon. Okay. Actually, and I will go into that tomorrow in my session about advanced live meetings.
Nice.
As to plug that, but the key thing is last week at Microsoft Build, Microsoft has announced that they will provide support for NDI, which is network device interfaces, which will allow you to stream multiple cams. But
yeah, the stream board and that sort of thing. Yeah. Cool.
But let's see if we have any questions. I see one coming in. Oh, great session. Thanks.
Thanks.
That's feedback.
Thanks very much. I never mind those.
These are always good.